I'll go ahead and share mine. I won't green text it, too long for that. I was going camping with this group of about 10-15 people for some volunteer work I was doing. Looks good on resumes and whatnot. There were only 4 other people around my age 23, the rest were either really young, 13-15, or in their 40s-50s. The 4 others and I were pretty good friends, and we usually don't get much sleep whenever we're spending a weekend together. This trip was for 3 days. It was spring break, and I hadn't slept the night before, but I'm conditioned to going on no sleep pretty well, so I had no problem when one of our 4 suggested that we go on a hike. We decided to go pretty late at night so none of the youngsters would follow us in. Unfortunately our plan didn't work and we ended up with an entire pack of teenagers following us. We had an obligation to watch them because 5 of us were volunteers, so we had no choice. We decided to make it short, and take them on a pretty rough hike so they wouldn't come with us whenever we went hiking the next time. It ended up being a bad idea. We ended up splitting up into several groups. I stayed with one group with one of my friends. One of the other 4, the big guy, decided to go trail some deer we spotted earlier. The deer scared one of the girls who screamed at the top of her lungs and was being skittish about everything out there. Another was with the other group of kids, and the last one decided to head back to camp. Needless to say the hike was ruined. We ended up far enough from camp. And while there were a bunch of annoying teens with us, we were convinced one of the kids from the other group was in the forest trying to fuck with us. We heard rustling at several points, and we kept hearing the same scream deeper in the woods, which sounded like the girl who screamed earlier about the deer. She was with the other group. Anyway, we got back to camp, told the kiddos to shut the fuck up and go to sleep, because they were being loud the entire hike. And we all set up base next to this trail that lead into the woods. We stayed there for several hours before morning, simply because we couldn't sleep, when the big guy who left to hunt some deer joined us. Later on I was discussing with him how the deer seemed abnormally large, and he just turned to me with a serious look on his face and said those weren't deer. I got almost right next to one, all I could see were its eyes, and it wasn't moving. It was almost as big as me. Now, keep in mind that this guy was about 6 feet 6 inches or 67 inches, and he's one of those heavy-set guys who you'd think would be able to kill a man in one punch, and he seemed pretty spooked. I thought he was fucking around and dismissed it. Fast forward to the next night, the previous hike took too much of a toll on the teens, save 2. One of them was this loud chick, and I didn't mind having her around as much as the other kid. The other was a complete retard. He was loud, annoying, and had a sense of humor equivalent to that unfunny eel meme. He tried making jokes all the time. There was never a moment of silence from this kid. This time only the big guy, 2 of our 5-man group, and 2 teens went with us. We decided to go see some sights this time. Apparently when a few of them had gone camping before, they found this secret room next to this old Ford-type building. While we were headed to that room the retarded kid got separated from us. He just wandered off with his flashlight. We ended up finding him and he got scolded for being stupid and wandering off at 1 a.m. when he didn't know the area. Instead of being a whiny bitch like he usually would, he was completely silent, and he seemed kind of like he was in a daze. At this point we hadn't slept for 2 days. For me it was 3, so I chalked it up to him being tired and not being able to handle the hike. Later on I realized that the kid had slept that last night, because I saw him go into his tent and crash with most of the teenagers. The other girl hadn't, however. So we go back to the fort and head up to the top room, where the chick had decided to go to sleep. The whole way back, that retarded kid was walking really awkwardly. He looked like a goddamn baby horse, not to mention he was being completely silent still. One of us had to walk behind him to make sure he didn't fall back onto the rocks. Anyway, when we got to that top room and the chick fell asleep, the kid laid down and fell asleep immediately after. We didn't care that much, They're about 13 and 14, they couldn't handle it, we guessed. The rest of us entertained ourselves by making fucking shadow puppets for 2 hours. At the end of that, we were all kind of dozing off, and we were all so sleep deprived we couldn't smell cigarette smoke anymore. I was the most alert of them, probably because I was still sitting up and keeping watch. At about 3 a.m. the kid stands up out of nowhere, and the other guys snap out of it because we're thinking the fuck is he doing now? And he starts stumbling toward me in his awkward jerky movements, and I'm probably because I was still sitting up and keeping watch. They're thinking he's going to fucking fall on me, so I start telling him to sit back down, and then the others join in and command him to sit back down. At this point he starts twitching backwards, and there's a ledge not too far behind him, so we're yelling at him to sit the fuck back down now because we think he's going to fall off. The big guy is about to stand up and so am I, so this kid doesn't die. Then the kid starts sounding like he's trying to talk, and I have no idea what he's trying to say. His voice doesn't sound normal at all, and he collapses back down and goes back to sleep. We brush it off because we're tired and we decide it's time to go back to camp. So we wake up the chick, and say it's time to go. As we try to wake the kid up he won't budge. My first thought is he's dead Jim, but the big tries picking him up and he ends up standing up on his own, but he still isn't moving correctly, so the big guy has to pretty much carry the fucker back down, along with his bag, into the truck we all came in, which wasn't too far. The rest of us get our stuff in and get in, and the kid tries getting into the same side as me and he twitches backward before he gets in. It was at this point I noticed that he's kind of bruised up. Not really on his head much, just on his arms. He didn't have those bruises the night before. He's still being quiet and shit, so I check his forehead to make sure he's not dying or anything and he doesn't have a fever, plus I know he didn't do any drugs because the program we were volunteering for is one of those churchy drug-free programs, so I have no idea what the fuck is wrong with him. When we get back to camp he gets out, leaves his bag and his flashlight, which was weird because he was being pissy about anyone touching either of them when we began our hike. He goes off toward the edge of the camps, and his tent wasn't over there, but we don't care at this point because we think he's probably just taking a piss or something, and when we're at the site, he's not our responsibility anymore. Everyone else goes to sleep immediately but me and the big guy stay awake for a bit and discuss what happened with the retarded kid. The big guy's in /x/file too, and we both read about Goatman a few times, so we brought that up. As we were discussing it and analyzing the situation it just got more and more airy, and at one point he mentioned that while the kid was standing up all the crickets and shit just went quiet in the background, which I'd barely noticed at the time. We decided to keep watch, because we hadn't seen any sign of that kid yet. About 30 minutes into our watch he decided that he needs his phone to keep track of the time and I needed to take a piss, so we left our watch. He took my flashlight because it's brighter than his, and I took the kid's flashlight because I wasn't going far. Before we left, he set his flashlight down on the bed of our friend's truck. As I'm headed back I see a few flashes from what I thought was my flashlight, and it was just some flickering like someone was turning it on and off. It was him signaling me to where he was, so we sat back down and resumed our watch. Barely even a few minutes later he realized that his flashlight was gone. We searched for it and turned up with nothing. I just told him to use my flashlight, but we were both pretty alert at this point. About 10 minutes later his dog, which he'd left at the campsite while we were hiking, lifts up his head and starts growling at the woods. I'm watching that side because we were both keeping an eye on each other's blind sides. Over to where the dog was growling I see something flickering in the woods. These woods are about 40-50 feet from our current location, so I let him know. Now we're both just watching this flickering in the woods and we realize that it looks like his flashlight, and it's flashing on and off like it was signaling. I then realized that the forest was quiet again, the crickets had stopped chirping and everything We just sit there and watch it because fuck investigating. And it stops about 15 minutes later. A while after that he decides he needs to get some sleep because he'll be driving back the next day, and I say alright, I'll stay up and patrol the site, so I do. It's cold as fuck out there and I'm armed with nothing but a flashlight and axe. It was about 4:50 a.m. Luckily, nothing else happened that night. The next day we see the retard kid again, and I had no idea where he came from. He didn't come out of his tent, and the last time I'd seen him he was headed toward the woods. Someone told him to get in the car, and he just went in and sat there while some other people packed up his stuff. No one else seemed to notice his weird speaking because everyone was busy packing their stuff and loading it up. When we got back I headed home immediately to shower and get some sleep. The next time I went back to that place I volunteer for, the kid wasn't there. He was always there. This happened over a week ago and I still haven't heard anything about the kid, nor have I seen him.